Fast and Furious franchise only wishes it could integrate its car product placement as smoothly as this movie. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Continuing my Planet of the Apes review series, today I'm going to be talking about the 9th film in the franchise, 2017 sci-fi war drama sequel, War for the Planet of the Apes. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. War for the Planet of the Apes stars Andy Serkis, Woody Harrelson, and Amiah Miller, and was directed by Matt Reeves. Several years after the beginning of the human-ape war, it tells the story of chimp leader Caesar, who sets out to seek revenge against a brutal colonel who attacked his community. The Planet of the Apes franchise started long before the Caesar reboot trilogy came around, and will likely continue long after it as well, but it's undeniable that these 3 films are responsible for the franchise's modern popularity resurgence. These movies are connected, not only to each other, but also to both ends of the franchise timeline, to what came before and to what inevitably comes after. But despite all of these connections, the reboot trilogy remains its own contained story, and War for the Planet of the Apes is the final chapter of that story, the final chapter of Caesar's journey. It's remarkable to have a series of rebooted films like this. It's one thing to have a successful reboot, but then to go on to have not one but 2 successful sequels to that reboot, all of an equally high caliber. Each film in this trilogy is a different type of story, with a different focus and subgenre, different levels of action versus emotion and drama. They're all different types of films, but they're all united by Caesar. Those inherent differences make it really difficult to claim that War is the best story yet, or the biggest story yet, but it is the most ambitious of the trilogy. Several years after the end of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, we watch as the remnants of the world descend into militarized chaos. Apes are perceived as an ongoing threat, and with the surviving humans succumbing to bizarre viral side effects, the fear that was established earlier in the franchise lives on. Similarly, the anti-war themes of the franchise continue here, expanding to show the devastating effects of an ongoing hate-filled, fear-driven conflict like this. It is a war story, so the film is aptly named, but this isn't a constant action-packed battle film. There are sieges and fights and escape plans, but also a lot of emotional drama. This is a much slower-paced film when compared to the previous 2 chapters of this trilogy. There's a lot more discussion, more human drama, or I guess I should say hominid drama. It spotlights the brutality of war, of prisoner of war work camps, of the flawed decision-making from all of the characters who are in charge. It's also a smoldering revenge tale that darkly expands upon what the trilogy had done before, showing us the worst of both humans and apes as they work to preserve their separate ways of life. There's certainly a lot of plot here, but as has been the case throughout this reboot trilogy, this film features a very character-driven story, solidly seated in the ape corner. These movies have always encouraged us to root for the apes, but none more so than this. Rise and Dawn both featured good human characters who showed us and Caesar a glimmer of hope when it came to the potential for the species to work together, but that hope is almost non-existent here. Despite efforts to resolve the conflict peacefully, Caesar and his group are only met with violence from a literal army of human antagonists, led by the fanatical and brutal colonel. We get glimpses of the reasoning behind the human decisions here. We can understand the fear motivating these people, and the fact that they misguidedly think they're saving humanity, but even that understanding is not enough to gain our sympathy. In fact, the only human worthy of our sympathy here is the silent young girl that Caesar begrudgingly rescues. Yes, she's human, but she's also something new. She's Nova. As interesting as some of the human characters are here, the apes are still the stars. This 3rd chapter is lacking a true ape antagonist like Koba, though even he still has some impact in this film, but we do get some more characterization and emotion from the other apes to balance things out a bit. Rocket, who first appeared in Rise, has a bigger role again here, and Maurice is just as wise as ever. We even get some minor comic relief from the new addition Bad Ape, but the real character focus is once again on Caesar. This whole trilogy is his, and this third chapter might just be his most profound yet. He's always been a good leader, strong but compassionate, driven by a moralistic code and his dual understanding of both humans and apes. At his core, he's a pacifist trying to end the conflict. That is, until he's pushed too far. Hatred was never his style. Vindictive anger and revenge were never what he believed in or taught, and yet he's faced with both of those things here. The war of this film's title is just as much about an actual war between apes and humans as it is about an internal war within Caesar. A war for his soul and morality in the face of tragic loss. And his journey is even more poignant than ever as a result. This film is by far the most emotional movie of the franchise, which is saying something, especially with these reboot films. There are moments that hit you emotionally throughout, but it's more than a little difficult not to get teary-eyed by the end of this film. Who would have thought a story about talking apes would be so moving? Much of this emotion comes from the story and dialogue, and a lot of it also comes from the performances, but there's this layer that comes from seeing these apes in these scenarios, from seeing their expressions and their eyes. The most human characters in this story aren't even human. Like the previous two films in the reboot trilogy, the visual effects are remarkable here. Each of these movies look great on their own, but when viewing them back to back, the improvements are definitely noticeable. So by the time we reach this third chapter here, the apes look photorealistic. And unlike Rise and Dawn, there aren't really any ape renderings that stand out as a bit wonky. In fact, there are times when it's hard to believe that these aren't actual apes. You know, apart from the fact that they're riding horses and talking to one another. In addition to more lifelike CGI, the motion capture improvements here also allowed for even more detail with the faces than ever before. There are more ape characters here, meaning more emotional arcs, more motion capture performances, and more extreme conditions. Rise of the Planet of the Apes brought motion capture on location. Dawn exposed it to rain and mud, and then War exposed it to snow and freezing temperatures. The technology and the actors, in thin lycra suits, were put to the test, and both succeeded. Andy Serkis' performance is expectedly phenomenal. Everything that Caesar does and expresses in this film has its origins with him and his performance. And reboot franchise mainstay Karin really shines here too, as Maurice gets his biggest and most emotional role yet. This third chapter in the trilogy might not be the battle-filled epic that many were expecting, but it is an epic nonetheless, concluding a 3-film character arc and leader's journey. Following in the paw steps of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, this movie takes on an even darker tone. Planet of the Apes is a franchise long known for its bleak, grim endings, but I would argue this movie is the darkest one of these films has ever been, and yet it works. It's not grim for the sake of it or for shock value. It fits the story. It fits the character journey. It's tough to watch at points, made even more challenging by the years of attachment we have to Caesar, his community, and their plight. It's a slow-paced dramatic film that may seem like a far cry from the sci-fi action of old, but it's a moving and surprisingly profound tale. A fitting closing chapter to the trilogy, but also an intriguing foundation for the potential future. Not just of the franchise's timeline future we've known about for close to 60 years now, but also for the franchise future we're not yet aware of. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number 1 is once again Caesar. I might be starting to sound like a bit of a broken record here with this trilogy, but can you really blame me? Caesar is this trilogy. His journey and character arc across the 3 movies is the foundation and driving force behind these stories. Here, we see a middle-aged Caesar fighting not only for his family and ape kind, but for his own soul and his morality and code of ethics. He finds himself in a place of revenge, fearing that he's slipping into Koba's shoes, and the film follows as he tries to battle his way back to being the leader we know him to be. It's a strong, emotional story for him here, but when paired with the pieces of his journey we saw in Rise and Dawn, it's something truly noteworthy. The second pro is the emotion. The Planet of the Apes films have always had strong thematic underpinnings. Some of the original sequels even had gut-wrenching emotional moments, like the third act of Escape from the Planet of the Apes. But this reboot series really created characters and an ape world that we were able to get emotionally invested in. Rise and Dawn both had their touching moments and instances of emotional maturity. But War takes the emotion to a whole nother level. You care not only about Caesar, but about what he's going through, about what he loses and sacrifices throughout the film. It's dark, but not unbearably bleak, if only because of the glimmer of hope that is Caesar. There are many sad, affecting moments over the course of the story, but this movie reaches new heights of emotion by the end. It's extremely sad, but somehow also hopeful. Pro number 3 has got to be the visual effects. I know, another pro I've used for all 3 of these Caesar films. Well, yeah. Have you looked at them? The CGI and technical advancements are even more pronounced here, resulting in apes that look photorealistic. Eyes and expressions have always been good with these movies, but they're even further refined here, and the fur rendering in all sorts of weather and light conditions is fantastic. As usual, the CGI is only part of the VFX story here, with much of the credit going to the impressive motion capture performances by the ape actors. There are too many at this point to reasonably shout out in a review like this, but Andy Serkis, of course, deserves special recognition for his emotional work as Caesar here. On the con side, my only issues are just minor nitpicks. Yes, this trilogy is that strong that I only have minuscule gripes with each of them. In the case of War, the pacing does start to drag a bit at times. Never so much that it actually detracts from the experience, but there are a few dramatic moments, especially with the humans, where it's noticeable. The only other thing that kind of falls to the con side is Bad Ape. I say kind of, because he's more of a mixed aspect for me. There is something sort of refreshing and enjoyable about the levity he brings to the film, but at the same time, I can't help but feel like it was sort of a screenwriting crutch thrown in there when they realized just how dark and emotionally draining the rest of the story was getting. That said, even Bad Ape has some heavier, more emotional scenes, so he's just a minor mixed element for me. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying War for the Planet of the Apes, or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give War for the Planet of the Apes 4 out of 5 paws. With its top-tier visual effects and unexpectedly emotional character work, this is a fitting and highly moving end to the Caesar reboot trilogy. I would recommend War for the Planet of the Apes to anybody looking for an emotional war drama. If all you want is battle action, this might be a bit dull for you, but if you appreciate the human drama, or ape drama in this case, of some of the best war stories, this will probably deliver what you're craving. It's a bit different from its predecessors, but continues the stories and character journeys in a surprisingly emotional way. There's plenty to enjoy here if this is your first Planet of the Apes movie, but this is a story that definitely has the biggest impact if you're already attached to Caesar and his plight, thanks to the previous 2 films. If you liked War for the Planet of the Apes, I would recommend The Great Escape. No apes and no sci-fi here, but this is another great ensemble war drama, focusing on a group of prisoners of war plotting to escape from their imprisonment. There are definitely quite a few moments during the third act of War that draws inspiration from this movie. If you'd like another war drama that clearly inspired the film, you'll want to check out The Bridge on the River Kwai. As another character-centric prisoner of war drama, there are already some similarities, but add to that the relationship between captor and prisoner, the forced construction of a military fortification, and the fact that both films are based on books by Pierre Boulle, and you've got some undeniable connections. And if you'd prefer to stick with the Apes franchise, you should check out Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. The character connections and presence of Caesar help make this an obvious choice, but it's the thematic commentary on war and the unexpected emotion that'll probably be the biggest draw for fans of this movie. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen War for the Planet of the Apes? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite movie about prisoners of war? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe if you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.